Welcome back to the Culprit Mind, the channel where we don't just tell you what happened. We ask why. Every week, we step into the minds of history's most disturbing killers, breaking down the psychology, the patterns, and the warning signs that were missed, sometimes in plain sight. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing, because today's case is one of the most studied minds in criminal history. A man who didn't look like a monster, didn't act like one. And that was exactly the problem. This is the story of Theodore Robert Bundy. In 1974, the state of Washington was gripped by fear. Young women were vanishing, one after another, without a trace. No forced entry, no struggle, no witnesses. Whoever was taking them wasn't breaking down doors. He was walking through them. Police had almost nothing to go on. No consistent description, no motive they could pin down. Just disappearances. What they didn't know yet was that the man responsible for at least 30 confirmed murders. Some investigators believe the true number was far higher. Was someone nobody would have suspected. He was a law student. Articulate, well-dressed, he worked on a suicide hotline, where, by multiple accounts, he was genuinely good at his job. He had a girlfriend who described him as loving, attentive, normal. His name was Ted Bundy, and understanding how he did what he did requires understanding something uncomfortable. Charm and evil are not opposites. Sometimes, they're the same tool. To understand Bundy, we have to go back further, to a childhood that, on paper, looked unremarkable. He was raised believing his mother was his older sister, and his grandparents were his parents. A family secret, he later said, left him feeling a persistent sense of shame and confusion about his own identity. Psychologists who studied Bundy's case pointed to several early traits: a fascination with violent imagery, a growing skill at presenting a false self to the world, and what several examiners described as textbook traits of psychopathy: a profound lack of empathy, paired with an unusual talent for mimicking normal human emotion. This is the part that unsettles people most. Bundy wasn't a man hiding a monster behind a mask, in a very real sense. The mask was the only thing that was ever really there. Underneath it, investigators and psychologists who interviewed him at length described something closer to an absence, a void where empathy should have been. He studied psychology in college. He understood, better than most, how people build trust, how they read body language, how they lower their guard. And he used every bit of that knowledge against the very people who trusted him. Bundy's method was chillingly simple, and that simplicity is exactly what made him so effective. He would often appear injured, his arm in a fake cast or on crutches, and ask a young woman for help carrying something to his car. A textbook manipulation tactic, exploiting the instinct to help someone who appears vulnerable and turning it into a trap. He drove a Volkswagen Beetle, an unassuming, almost friendly-looking car. Nothing about him triggered alarm. That was the point. Investigators later noted that Bundy's victims often shared physical characteristics. Many had long hair parted in the middle. Some theorized this pointed to an unresolved fixation from an earlier relationship, though Bundy himself never confirmed this directly, and psychologists caution against reducing any serial offender's motive to a single explanation. What's clear is this: Bundy didn't kill in a blind rage. His crimes were premeditated, controlled, and, most disturbingly, often committed with a kind of calm that terrified even seasoned detectives who later interviewed him. For years, Bundy operated across multiple states: Washington, Utah, Colorado, Florida, slipping through the fingers of law enforcement again and again. In 1975, he was finally arrested. Not for murder, but for a traffic stop that turned up suspicious items in his car. Handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar. It wasn't enough to convict him of murder. Yet. Then came something almost unbelievable. Twice. Bundy escaped police custody, once by jumping out of a courthouse library window. The second time, by crawling through a gap in his cell ceiling, losing enough weight beforehand to fit through it, and simply walking out. This wasn't luck. It was the same trait that let him deceive victims for years: patience, planning, and an almost total absence of the fear that would stop most people from taking such extreme risks. His final escape led him to Florida, where in January of 1978, he committed his most frenzied and reckless attack yet. An attack that finally gave investigators the evidence and the urgency they needed to close in on him for good. Bundy's trial became a media spectacle unlike anything the American justice system had seen before. Cameras were allowed in the courtroom for the first time in a case of this scale. Bundy, ever the performer, chose to represent himself for parts of the proceedings, turning cross-examinations into a stage for the same charm that had once disarmed his victims. This is where psychologists point to one of the most important lessons of the entire case. Bundy's charisma wasn't a side effect of his personality. It was a weapon, one he deployed consciously, in the courtroom just as he had on the street. Experts who study psychopathy often describe two key traits present in offenders like Bundy: a grandiose sense of self-worth and a near-total inability to feel genuine remorse. Bundy displayed both to a striking degree, reportedly showing more concern for how he was perceived by the public than for the lives he had taken. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to death. Even in his final days, Bundy attempted to use information about undiscovered victims as a bargaining chip, a final calculated act from a man who, until the end, treated human lives as currency. He was executed in January of 1989. Ted Bundy's case changed how law enforcement thinks about serial offenders. It contributed to the FBI's development of criminal profiling as a formal investigative tool, because Bundy proved something terrifying: that a killer didn't need to look, sound, or act like a monster to become one of the most prolific in history. His case is still taught in psychology and criminology programs today, not because his crimes were unique in method, but because his ability to blend in remains one of the clearest examples of how dangerous charm can be when it's completely unmoored from empathy. The uncomfortable truth Bundy leaves behind isn't just about him. It's about how much we rely on first impressions to judge safety, and how easily that instinct can be turned against us by someone who understands exactly what we're looking for. That's the story and the psychology of Ted Bundy. If you found this breakdown interesting, let me know in the comments which case you want us to profile next. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because every week on the Culprit Mind, we go deeper into the minds behind the headlines. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.